Thank you, Kyle. Welcome to my fellow Laugh Lab Storymasters and to our guests. We have so far as guests Cheryl Marks and Risa Kim, and she is having a problem with her audio, so I think she switched to her phone so that she can speak, but that might mean she doesn't have a camera.
And we have another
And
guest. We have another guest,
Christine
Christine.
is here is Christine Carlton. Welcome, Christine. Welcome to Laugh Lab Storymasters. We are an advanced club and we are embarking on a brand new journey as a club. We decided we really wanted to hone our humor and storytelling skills. So we will have a year-long adventure. When I say that year-long, we're starting here in September. We're going to end about a year from now with a speaker showcase. Most of our meetings will be, well, we'll all be have an online presence. Some of our meetings will include some of us, those who can make it to a location, to be on site. So we have an audience that's also on site with us. All of this is to help us really hone what it means to tell a story. And we're going to do that by focusing on specific aspects of storytelling and adding 3 evaluators for each speaker. One evaluator will focus on the story and how well the story is crafted. One evaluator will focus on humor and how the speaker added humor, the types of humor they might have used. And the other evaluator will focus on the content, how well we put it all together. We hope that this helps us all improve. Not only are you listening to good speakers, but you're listening to fabulous evaluations. And we hope really that you join us if you're a guest as a member, so you too can benefit from this experience. With that, I would like to introduce our Toastmaster for the evening, Cynthia Sanderson. Cynthia and I are actually in 2 clubs together, which is delightful. Cynthia is also our Vice President membership. You'll be hearing a little bit from her at the end of our meeting. And Cynthia is a skilled Toastmaster, stepped right into this role. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Take it away.
Thank you, Mary, for a wonderful, warm introduction. Today I'm going to go over the roles that we have for the meeting and introduce the speakers. But first, the roles. For grammarian, Emmy is going to be our grammarian. Emmy, would you like to explain that role, please?
Well, certainly. As grammarian, I get to listen carefully to everyone's talk and write down the things that really impacted me or things that might not be said in the best possible way. And I also have a word of the day for us. And since we're doing humor stuff, the word is ludicrous. And I was going to put that in the chat. So I'll just post that in here. There it is. Ludicrous, so foolish, unreasonable, or out of place as to be amusing or ridiculous. It's ludicrous that I have been fined. Anyway, so I challenge you guys who are going to be speaking to use ludicrous as your word of the day. All right. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Emmy. Next up is our timer, and that is Bob Flynn. Bob, would you go over the timing rules?
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. So we have 3 primary speaking goals tonight. Phil is our first speaker, and he's speaking for 8 to 12 minutes. And at 8 minutes, I will put up a green. 10, I will put up a yellow, and at 12, I will put up a red. Kyle is speaking 2 different times. The first time he has up to 25 minutes. So at 21 minutes, I'll give him a green. At 23, I'll give him yellow. At 25 minutes, I'll give him red. And beyond 25 minutes, we'll give him the ludicrous buzzer, pull him off the screen. And then the third time we have speaker, Kyle is doing a round workshop with us, and which is ending at 7:52. So at 7:48, I will give us a green. At 7:50, a yellow, and at 7:52, we'll do the red. And then I also have a let's see, a grammarian. A 3-minute will give Emmy, I believe, or who's doing? Oh, no, yeah,
Yes.
he's doing the
Yes.
grammarian. So I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll give you like a 2.5 minute, 3 and 3.5, I guess, on that Emmy.
Okay.
All right. So back to you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Next up is our general evaluator, and that is filled by Lee. Lee, would you like to say a little bit about general evaluator?
Yes, thank you, Cynthia, fellow story masters and guests. I will call on our 2 special evaluators, our grammarian and our timer, and then I will give an overall evaluation of the meeting. And were we going to evaluate Phil and Kyle tonight? Kyle? Okay. So I will say some comments about our 2 speakers and ask for the rest of the crowd to make some comments, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Cynthia. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first speaker today is Phil Pearson. And he is doing a speech on selecting your story. And if I can pull up this introduction, here we go. Phil began his Toastmasters time 10 years ago with the vision of becoming a more impactful leader and communicator. In the beginning, he focused on polishing the techniques involved with public speaking. Then he learned that the most impactful speakers told the story. Tonight, he's sharing what he is in the process of learning on his way to becoming a better storyteller. Please welcome to the virtual stage, Phil.
Thank you so much, Madam Toastmasters. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Like my introduction indicated, I began my Toastmasters journey about 10 years ago, and I thought I can master this public speaking. I've been doing it most of my life in some fashion, but I want to focus on those techniques and really become a good public speaker. I focused on polishing my techniques, doing all the basics of public speaking that we learned in our manuals, and I listened to the feedback. Then I got some feedback from one of my presentations where the evaluator said something to the effect of, great information, smoothly presented, it was just not very interesting. I knew then I had some work to do. I had a revelation. I needed more than just technique. Then a new revelation hit me vis-a-vis Darren LaCroix at one of our very own club special presentations. Darren told us everything can be presented as a story. Not only can everything be presented in the context of a story, when we do use stories, our audience will be more engaged, they will be more deeply impacted, and they will actually remember our presentations longer. If we use a story, than if we don't use a story and just present the facts, like on Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. So that's when I embarked on my improve my storytelling techniques saga. and it fit perfectly within Lab Storymasters. And I knew that if I want to learn to weave these stories into my presentations at work and my synagogue at parent teachers, I will need to learn more about the basics of storytelling and not just public speaking. That's where I come to you tonight as a fellow journeyer on this path towards storytelling. I'm going to share just a couple of first lessons that I've learned. And the first of those is I've learned that I need to, before I even embark on writing my speech, preparing my presentation, I need to write down and clearly understand my why. Why am I telling this story? Why am I doing this presentation? How does this story fit into my presentation? And that actually comes in two forms, that why. And I want to address the big elephant in the room first and get it out of our way. The big elephant is the WIFM, the elephant named WIFM. What's in it for me? Let's be honest with ourselves so that we can address it and figure it out. Now, most of us, when we do tell a story, when we're doing a presentation, we have something that we want very much ourselves. Maybe we want to win a speech contest. Maybe we want to do an interview and get a new job. Maybe I want to convince my boss that this is the best avenue to take, new course of action to take. Or maybe, just maybe, I want to influence my family to go visit the Grand Canyon instead of Disneyland. Well, whatever it is, let's identify that WIFM elephant, acknowledge it, and then we can set it aside for a bit. Because the next one is probably even more important, and that why is, why does my audience need to hear this story or see me tell this story? There is many whys in this as there are presentations and audiences, but here are a couple of common whys that I've encountered. For example, maybe we just want to simply entertain the audience. My dad was a great campfire storyteller. I remember when we go visit Grandma, he'd have me and my cousins sitting around him, either on the floor or outside on the ground, sitting cross-legged, googly-eyed at what the story's going to tell. He would tell these outlandish stories of being in nature and being chased by bears, all kinds of crazy things. Not only were we listening intently, we'd even give him lines to fit into his story. Perhaps that's why we want to tell a story. Another reason we might want to tell the story is that we want to inform our audience. Maybe we have a report that's coming up, maybe, or a report to give. Maybe it's a business meeting. But even there, the storytelling will help. I'm sure we have all been to these business meetings where the story is simple numbers, graphs, circles, and arrows, and we leave that with no message, no memory, and just tears in our eyes. But we can let those numbers actually be our story, be part of our story. And we can turn those numbers, those charts, and those graphs into the story that we need to tell. And the third is maybe we want to persuade our audience. This is probably something that most of us have seen in speech contests, for example. And the best example of this that I can remember is I went to the Toastmasters International Conference in Vancouver, BC a few years ago. I remember thinking when I went to the Golden Gavel presentation that I was wondering, I didn't even know what the Golden Gavel was. But I do remember that story that Erin Gruwell told of her teaching experience in the inner cities of Los Angeles, and how she used that to come up with a book that contained all these stories from her students. That presentation from Aaron is still in my mind. It's still etched in my soul. And it changed forever how I looked at teaching and how I looked at doing presentations. So in a nutshell, we use storytelling in any other number of reasons, but choose one. And even within your speech, there may be other reasons within a reason. Okay, now we've gone through all the soul searching. We've identified the Whiffam elephant in the room. We've identified our individual reasons for telling our stories. I got a question. Where in the world do I get the stories to tell? In a nutshell here, the best source of our stories is our own life. I suggest we look inward and what we experience around us day by day. Our lives are full of stories. Our lives are full of experiences. And these experiences are often full of self-discovery, honesty, and lessons, life lessons. For example, our trips to the grocery store, our business trips, our Toastmasters meetings even. Or how about our family vacations? Even routine chores around the house can lend a story for us to use. Some examples of just everyday life experiences that I've heard in our club that have had stories built around them. I heard something about a race back to a locker room that resulted in someone being stuck on the top of a chain link fence in his running shorts. I remember hearing about a woman, a squirrel, and an epic struggle for power. There was another story about 9 lives of a cat and the amorous ways of that same said cat. And finally, a dog, a Christmas tree, and a Christmas dinner that the dog decided to take over. Each one of us have lives that are full of stories, so why do we think we don't have any stories? Well, I think there's a common theme here as well. First, I've noticed that so many of us think our lives are so ordinary, who would be interested in our story? They are, examples I just shared with you are examples of where ordinary life experiences can make an interesting story. Another reason is we might miss the opportunities for just ordinary seeing them because our minds are on other issues, we're distracted by life, and we miss the story that is right in front of our face. And third, we don't have stories because even if we do see them, even if we do recognize the miraculous in the ordinary, we forget them. We got a lot of stuff going in our brains, and sometimes that one story gets overwritten by another story. And that's a challenge to how do we keep track of all these stories for a long time. And here's where I have a couple of suggestions. Recognize that we do have stories in our lives. The ordinary is a great source of storytelling for us, and we might want to have a mechanism to record these stories for future use. Maybe a log, a little journal. Some of people are really good at journaling or diary keeping. When we do that, we can then go back in history and check, find those stories and apply them in the right place in our presentation. Those are the first 2 lessons I wanted to share with you tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to share them with you. Again, here's a couple of the main keys that I would like to leave you with. Every presentation is a storytelling opportunity. Stories will make our presentations more impactful than a simple presentation of facts. Before we launch into telling a story or launching into giving our presentation, reflect on and identify our whys for telling this story. And finally, stories are all around us. Pay attention, find them, and then record them for future use. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Phil. That was excellent. I really enjoyed it. I did want to ask a point of order. I noticed you were doing your presentation mastery speech for tonight. Evaluation. Did you want a book manual evaluation?
No, I do whatever the evaluation you had in mind. It's perfect. I just put that in there for.
Oh, a placeholder.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to volunteer to do the manual one for you.
Okay. Well, if you have time to do it, just do the written part. That would be great.
That's what I mean, the written part.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Next up is Kyle Hall. He's going to be doing his Decoding Humor presentation. We all want to include more humor in our presentations. We want that thrill of hearing our audience laugh. Our next presenter, Kyle Hall, felt the same way. He used to be unfunny, really and truly. He couldn't make an audience laugh to save his life. Now he has a reputation around our greater Western Washington and Alaska districts as a humorous speaker. What changed? What secret did Kyle decipher? He'll tell us about it today. Talking about decoding humor. Please help me welcome Kyle Hall.
Thank you, Cynthia. When I was getting ready to come here tonight, my wife looked at me and said, "Are you going to wear that shirt?" It wasn't this shirt. Now, for those of you who aren't in a long-term committed relationship, you may have thought that when my wife said, "Are you going to wear that shirt?" she was asking me a question. She was not asking me a question. She was giving me a command. And the command was to change your shirt and to put on a shirt that I won't be embarrassed for you to be seen in. How do I know that? How do I know that what appears to be an innocent question is in reality a command? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my marriage came with a secret decoder ring, which helps me understand that strange and mysterious language called wife speak. It helps me understand that when what is coming out of my wife's mouth doesn't really match what's in her head. Let me give you an example. I ask my wife, we're thinking about going out to supper. And she says, I ask her, "Honey, where do you want to go? What do you want to eat?" "Oh, I don't care." Or, "Honey, your birthday's coming up. What would you like for your birthday?" "Oh, I don't care." Now you might think that she doesn't care. You'd be wrong. What she's really saying is, "Kyle, you get to show me how much you love me by guessing what I really want." Now, ladies and gentlemen, what I just did for you back there was the opening paragraphs of a talk called My Secret Decoder Ring, which I created and gave in District 2 when I was living over there. And I entered it in the humor speech contest and took it all the way up to the district level. And I learned some lessons creating that speech, and I'm going to share those lessons with you and go back and forth between speech and lesson, because I think it's a great way to look at what we're learning. Now, before we start talking about where to look for humor, let's talk about the why. Why humor? Why would we want humor? Well, okay, it's fun to be able to make an audience laugh. It's really fun when you can make an audience laugh. It is. But is there any other value to it? Yes. Humor will enlighten and enliven your presentation. You can talk about boring and dour stuff and make it humorous, you can keep the audience engaged, and they will be more likely to remember your presentation. If you hear two presenters talk about a boring subject, the one who makes it funny is the one you're going to remember. Now, if that's the why of it, where can we use humor? In what kind of presentations can we use humor? I mean, yeah, you can put together a humorous talk that's intended just to make people laugh, but where else? Well, my contention is almost everywhere else, almost everywhere. Unless you're talking about tragedy or horror, it's okay to inject humor. If you're talking about tragedy or horror, leave the humor out. I used humor in my parents' eulogy. I gave the eulogy for my mother 13 years ago and my father a year ago, and they were both loaded with humor because they had good senses of humor. And I wanted the people, the attendees at the memorial service to remember my parents' sense of humor. So I told some of the silly things they did and some of the funny things they said. I used humor. I had a dry as dust presentation to give, and I used humor to enlighten it and enliven it, as I said. And I'll tell you more of that story in a few minutes. Now, how do we find humor? Well, Phil already gave us the first key. Look in our own lives. That story I was talking about, my wife asking me, are you going to wear that shirt? That story is true. Now, it's not true that it happened tonight. Years ago, my wife looked at me and said, are you going to wear that shirt? And I realized she wasn't really asking me a question. And I called her on it. And she laughed. And I laughed. We had a good laughing moment together. And then a light bulb went on in my head. And I said, we're laughing together over language. This is great material. And I made a note. Not then. I didn't stop laughing to go write a note about storytelling. I waited until later, my wife had gone on to something else and the laughter had died down. And then I went and found my story journal and I wrote in it about that, because that's golden material. So the very first place we look for humor is, where do we create laughter in our life? And we need to start noticing that. When you're having dinner with a spouse, when do you create humor? When you're talking with kids or grandkids or parents or friends, when you're at work and you're sitting around the water cooler chatting and you say something and people laugh, you go, oh, somebody laughed. What did I do? Oh, I made a pun. Okay. And write it down. Not then, wait till later, write it down. So that's the first thing we do. Now let's go back to the speech. So I've talked to you about how my secret decodering, it helps me understand when what my wife is saying doesn't match what's in her head. It also helps me to understand, it warns me when my wife is asking those dangerous questions. What do I mean by dangerous question? Well, dangerous questions like, do you love me? Or the even more insidious, why do you love me? Now, men get themselves in trouble all the time trying to answer the question, but it's not a question. When, at least for my wife, when she says, do you love me or why do you love me? What she's really saying is, I'm feeling low. My self-esteem is down and I need you to build me up. And so rather than trying to answer the question, I tell my wife how much I love her and how she's the center of my life. My secret decodering does have a disadvantage, however. It only works one way. It helps me understand her. It doesn't help her understand me. Like when she says, Kyle, what would you like for dinner? And I go, oh, I don't care. Doesn't she understand that means pizza? Now, what I just did there was I demonstrated two emotional states, fear and frustration. Fear, when you're asked that dangerous question, why do you love me? Oh no. or why doesn't my wife understand my deep and abiding love of pizza? So fear and frustration are wonderful sources of humor. If you're frustrated at the morning traffic, that's a source of humor. And if you're thinking, yeah, but I've seen comedians do that, they do it because it works. Now, I'm not saying you should do the same thing they all do, and certainly you're not going to steal from their material. Find your own unique spin, your own way of looking at it. What are you afraid of? What frustrates you? And when I'm talking about fear, I'm not talking about those very reasonable fears like fear of dying or fear of spiders or your in-laws coming to visit. Those are very reasonable fears. It's the other things. When somebody challenges you to step up to a new job, oh, there's fear there. That's good material. That's good material. You can look at that depending on how you express it. When you're looking at a change of life, I'm going to retire and now I'm going to have to fill my hours with something other than work. There's fear there. That's great material. When you're going to well, in a couple of months we have Thanksgiving coming up. At least here in the US, we have Thanksgiving coming up. And we're all the family are going to be gathered around the table and enjoying food and feasting. And you just know your brother-in-law or that uncle is going to say something stupid and you're going to want to beat him with a buttered roll. That frustration is great material. That desire to beat him with a buttered roll is great material. So we need to write it down. Keep a record of it. Back to the speech. So I mentioned that my secret decoder ring has a disadvantage. It only works one way. It has another disadvantage. Sometimes my secret decoder ring can take a while to recognize a word or phrase it hasn't dealt with before. It doesn't always translate it first time out. Let me give you an example. This was a number of years ago. My wife and I had one car, which we used and got around on just one car, and it was getting on in years. It was going to die. It wasn't going to last much longer. And my wife wanted to we were going to have to get another car. My wife wanted to go and get a new car. Well, I didn't want to drive a new car off the lot and lose 30% of the value the moment from driving 10 feet. And so I wanted to get a used car. And we discussed this, but neither one could make the other one understand or give in, so we didn't come to a resolution. And a week or two later, we discussed it again without a resolution. And a week or two later, we discussed it again. And the discussions are getting louder, and they're getting hotter. And after the fourth discussion, I gave up. It wasn't worth it. I was fighting with my wife, and I never fight with my wife. And I don't want to fight with her over a car. It's just not worth it. I gave up. Our car was going to die. We weren't going to buy a new car or a used car, and I don't know what we were going to do. But I wasn't going to have this. I wasn't going to keep arguing with her about this. It was at that point that a friend of ours said, "Hey, Kyle and Carol, I'm getting divorced. I'm moving back to Boston. I'm going to leave my car behind. You guys know anybody who wants to buy this car?" And my wife elbows me. I'm like, "What? Go talk to her." "Why?" "Go make an offer on the car." "You don't want me to make an offer on the car." "Go make an offer on the car." "You don't want me to make an offer on the car? That's a used car." "It's not a used car. Go make an offer." It was at that point that my secret decoder ring finally translated used car as my wife understood it. Every time I said I wanted to buy a used car, she heard that I wanted to buy an unreliable death trap sold by a pond-dwelling, scum-sucking used car salesman. Well, I don't want to buy one of those either. What I should have been saying all this time is, "Honey, can we buy a non-new car from someone we trust?" So the lesson here is, where can we look for when we make for source of humor? Think about the stories you tell your friends. When you're with your closest friends and you're sitting around swapping stories as people will, what do you tell them that makes them laugh. I was sitting with my closest friends here in Washington State. My wife and I were telling them this story, and my wife and I were laughing about it, and they were laughing about it. And then, of course, I realized, oh, this is speech material. Write it down. Not then. Wait till later. But it's great speech material. It goes in the story journal. Now, I've been talking to you about where to look for humor. I want to talk about two tools that I've been using and an attitude. And during our year of stories and laughter, we're going to be talking about humor over and over again. And we're going to be sharing with you different tools. I'm going to talk about two of them tonight. The first is juxtaposition. If you notice, what I've been doing is I've been holding two things up and comparing them and using it to create humor. And in this case, it's what my wife thinks versus what she says, or what I think versus what I say. It goes both ways. And so that juxtaposition is a great way to create humor when you're comparing two things. The other thing I'm using is metaphor. I use the metaphor of the secret decoder ring. Now, those of you who are old enough, I think that's most of us, will remember cereal boxes with toys in the bottom, and you used to be able to get the secret decoder ring out of it so you could decode the secret message on the back of the box. This is, in a sense, a nod to that, but it's also a nod to spy literature and the fact that, you know, having to decode what the enemy is saying or having to decode what your spouse is saying. So I'm using the secret decoder ring as a metaphor within which to create humor. Let me give you another example to drive that point home. I mentioned I had to give a dry as dust presentation. I used to consult with, I was a project manager for a large Northwest aerospace company, which shall remain nameless. And while there, I had to use their methodology, their project management methodology, which could very briefly and succinctly be held in a 12-volume, massive, shelf-bending, set of books. It was huge. It was huge. But I had to learn it because I had to use it. And after I'd been there for about 2 years, my second level manager came to me and said, we're having a meeting of our third level manager, all the second level managers, and the first level managers who work for him. And we would like you to come and teach us about the project manager deliverables from that methodology. And my first comment was, well, I can do that. You realize it's a pretty boring talk. And they goes, yeah, it's boring, but we need to learn it. Okay, how much time are you going to give me? Oh, 45 minutes. Okay, 45 minutes in front of third and second and first level managers to bore them to death. Okay, when do you want it? In about 3 months. Fine. I have 3 months to prepare. I start gathering materials, move forward, get my thoughts, what's the minimum they need to know about, and so forth. 3 weeks before the presentation, they come to me and say, hey, you're supposed to present to us on Wednesday afternoon, but we realize that we're having a massive meeting of all the employees who work for that third level manager on down. And, 200 people in a room, and we're going to have a big afternoon meeting, and we'd like you to give your presentation there. No, you can't make me present a 45-minute coma-inducing presentation in front of people I have to work with. You can't. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I went home. I paced. I fretted. I complained about it. I thought about it. I talked to my wife about it. I complained some more. I thought some more. And finally, I said, I need a metaphor. I need a metaphor to take this complex thing and make it simple and understandable, and to make it humorous. I need to make it humorous. What can I do? Make it simple and make it humorous. A family at home on a Sunday afternoon. So I went into the presentation and I stood up and I said, I'm going to talk to you about this project management methodology, project management deliverables, and we're going to talk about a project, but we're not going to talk about any project you know about here. We're going to talk about family at home. Mom sitting in the office, balancing the checkbook. She's the executive committee, doesn't want to be disturbed. Little Joey and his 5-year-old friends are down in the basement playing video games. They're the end users. Sally, 12-year-old Sally, is both the project management and development team, and she's up in the, she's over in the house reading a book. Doesn't want to be disturbed either. Little Joey and his friends decide they're hungry, and they go, "Mom, can we have some chocolate chip cookies?" And Mom, being the executive committee, says, "Sally, would you please make your brother some chocolate chip cookies?" Okay. And she gets up and she starts making the cookies. She gets the first batch on the pan in the oven, at which point one of Joey's friends says, "Hey, wouldn't it be great to have some peanut butter chips in those chocolate chip cookies?" "Oh, that's a great idea. Mom, can we have some peanut butter chips in those chocolate chip cookies?" "Sally, can you do that?" Now, Sally, being a good project manager, already having the first batch of batter made and the first batch in the oven, goes, "No." And little Joey, being the end user, does exactly what all end users do. "Mom." And I'm doing this, and the executive committee, of course, who doesn't want to be disturbed, has to stop and negotiate the situation. So I lay this out, and I'm overacting. I'm overacting how much Mom doesn't want to be disturbed, how put out Sally is, how annoying and baby like little Joey is. And then I was like, and now all of this emotional drama could have been avoided if, when Joey asked for the peanut butter chips, Sally filled out a Form 105 that said, "Of course you can have peanut butter chips, but it will delay the delivery of the cookies for at least 45 minutes." And of course, and then I talked about another form and how it was used, and another project management deliverable and how it was used, and so forth. Got a lot of laughs. It worked. I took a complex thing and I made it simple, and I didn't get lynched. I didn't get lynched because I was really afraid I was going to bore the audience to tears. As a matter of fact, afterwards, I had several people compliment me. I had one guy walk up to me and say, "I've been in about 12 of these different, project methodology classes. This is the first one I ever learned anything." That was a heck of a compliment. When we say humor can be used to enlighten and enliven a speech, I am dead serious. It can save your butt if you're assigned to do something really dull or something dark, like a eulogy. My mother asked me to deliver my eulogy, and one of my first thoughts was, "Oh, am I going to make this, well, maybe not fun, but funny?" So metaphor, all of that is a talk about metaphor. I used family at home as a metaphor. I used secret decoding as a metaphor. Attitude. I talked about two tools and an attitude. The attitude is you have to be willing to be the fool. If you are really serious about maintaining your sense of dignity, humor is going to be hard to come by. If you're willing to share your embarrassing moments, if you're willing to try something and fall flat on your face and get up and try it again, you can learn to be funny. You can learn humor. You need to be willing to be the fool. Now, a couple of points I want to make about developing humor. I had in my speech originally, I had the question of, "Hey, does this dress make me look fat?" I took it out. Why did I take it out? Well, I took it out because I tried it in front of an audience. I used to have it in the speech. I did it in front of an audience. And the audience said several things. One, they thought I was wife deprecating. They thought I was putting down my wife. And that wasn't acceptable. And I certainly don't want to ever do that. They also thought it was cliche because a lot of humorists have used that. So I took that out. So we need to practice our humor in front of an audience, practice it in front of a listening audience, hopefully a live audience at some point, and get feedback. And our humor needs to be universal so that everybody can understand it, which is one of the reasons why I was talking about humor between committed couples as opposed to only man and woman or husband and wife or anything else. Humor between committed couples, which I think is fairly universal. Another favorite topic for humorists, parents and kids, humans and pets, fairly universal things. one of the other things we have to keep in mind is the humor has to add to making the point of the presentation. Phil mentioned you need to know what your why is. You need to know what the point of your presentation is, and the humor has to help you move towards that point. If it doesn't, cut it out. It's better to have a mundane, maybe slightly boring presentation on point than to have a humorous one where no one knows what you're talking about, what your message is. So when you know what your message is, get there, and only add humor if it helps you move in that direction. So my last lesson from giving that speech, my secret decoding speech, my last lesson for decoding humor for us is we need to practice. And you need to practice in front of an audience. And that's one of the things we're building into our year of stories and laughter. We're building practice in. 4 of our members, three or four of our members, I apologize, are going to sign up to practice speeches next month. And when they practice, they're going to get the 3 evaluations: story evaluation, humor evaluation, effectiveness and message evaluation. So if you are interested in practicing and developing your humor, join the club and sign up for a speaking slot. And I'm going to hand control back to you. Oh, actually, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to do a workshop based on the material we've just done here. So before you run off, because we've been here just about an hour, I want to give you, hopefully you all have a handout. You all have a copy of my handout. It was sent out, links to it were in the chat. I put the file in the chat. Links to it were in the emails that went out. So hopefully you all have a copy of the handout, because the second page of the handout is a worksheet for you. And I'm going to give you your instructions so that you can think about it during our break. So during our 5-minute break, quickly take a look at page 2 of the handout. You'll notice there's 4 quadrants. Choose which quadrant you want to work in tonight. You're only going to have time to work on one story tonight. So choose which quadrant you want to work in tonight. Come up with a 1 to 2 minute story that based on you whatever your experience is in that quadrant. Maybe it's something that frustrates you. So come up with a 1 to 2 minute story about that frustration. And when we come back from our 5-minute break, I will ask for a brave volunteer to stand up and tell their story. And then we, as a group, will give them feedback on what made it funny, and do we have any ideas on how they could make it even funnier. So with that, unless the Madam Toastmaster has an objection, let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, so we'll come back at 7:23. So we're going to get started again. And even while I try to grab this file, there it is, the Decoding Humor handout. It is off to Leisuk.
Okay.
I wanted to make a point. I forgot to make it during my presentation part, which is, Phil talked about making your speeches more memorable. I talked about making your speeches more memorable with humor. I gave that secret decoder ring speech more than 15 years ago back in District 2. When I go over to District 2, when I show up at a training or at a conference, I will still have people walk up to me and say, I remember that secret decoder ring speech. Where can I get one of those? For my husband. It's always a woman who wants one for her husband. I still get that today. And that's, people remember that stuff. So metaphor and humor will carry you far. Now, I asked you to choose a quadrant and to come up with a 1 to 2 minute story. So Bob, when we have volunteers, would you give him a green at 45, yellow at 1 minute, and red at 1 minute 15 seconds? I'm sorry, 1 minute, 1:30, 2 minutes, like table topics.
Table topics, okay.
Table topics. So who would like to go first? Who has a humorous story they would like to tell us in 1 to 2 minutes? I can't see. I'm gonna unspotlight myself so that I can see it. Bob. Okay, Bob wants to go.
let's see. Now I got to start my timer here.
So let's spotlight Bob.
Okay, so when I worked for the Navy as a civilian for 16 years before I went to another job. But during that time, I went to Washington, D.C. for a year and a half. It was meant to be like going to the corporate office and learn how the things work back there. And so I was a visitor from Keyport, Washington, and I had responsibilities within the group there in Crystal City, Virginia. Met a lot with different contractors from torpedo manufacturer out the country and the Newport Navy Design Center in Newport, Rhode Island. So it was a good year and a half. I really enjoyed it, learned a lot there. During my time there, there was a time where somebody came in and said this guy from Westinghouse in Cleveland was quitting. And he told that he had got advice from a high-ranking official at the office. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. That's the person I've worked with quite a bit, and I really didn't think much of it. I had this 10-minute walk every day between my apartment and the office. About a week later, I'm walking down the street and the light bulb comes on and it goes, that person was me. Because they had called, somebody had quit in one of the competitors, and I said, well, Dave Walker from Westinghouse, and I never thought more about it. So then I had to go in, but all of a sudden it's like dawned on me, like, I'm a high-ranking naval official. Oh my gosh, I better shape up. So that was quite an eye-opening experience, and not only humorous, but it has kind of made an impact on my career. So that's very cool.
Thank you, Bob. Now, let's use a traditional evaluation technique. What did Bob do in his short story that made it funny? Go ahead, Emmy.
Self-deprecating.
Yep. Anything else Bob did that made it funny? Cynthia?
Element of surprise.
Element of surprise, especially his own surprise.
Yes.
When he realized, wait a minute, the guilty party is me. Anything else? Okay, what could Bob have done that would have made this funnier, even funnier? I want to jump in here. So Bob, your opening setup was really long and was factual. And what you needed to do was you needed to get to emotion right away. Now, even though you're a professional coming from Keyport, you said the magic words. You were going to headquarters in Washington, D.C. And you should have, if, in my opinion, it would be funnier if you played up being the innocent tourist, oh, headquarters, Washington, D.C., and, looking, like looking around, like, and then mention that the 10-minute walk isn't really important, except that's where you did your thinking. You can mention that 10-minute walk earlier. Just drop it in. I found an apartment with a 10-minute walk to work. And then you need to play up the thing that makes it rich is the shift in emotion. The wonder of going to headquarters. Ooh, somebody's leaving because somebody said something. Ooh, I wonder who is the mystery. Who's the traitor? Who's the person who encouraged somebody to leave? Oh, crud, it's me. And then it goes from, oh, crud, it's me to, I'm an important naval official. So it's a real roller coaster of emotion crammed into 2 minutes.
Yeah, I like that. Those thoughts.
Other
Kyle.
comments for Bob? Okay, who wants to go next? You want to go?
I
Or you have a
had-
comment? Do you have a
I
comment?
had a comment, but I can go next too. I
Well,
don't care.
Give us your comment first.
Oh, well, I wasn't, his diction was a little sloppy when he was talking about what it is that somebody said. It took me a while to figure out that it was a naval official that what had he done? I couldn't quite figure out what he had done. So yeah, I think he went a little too quickly through that part.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to say that that the important naval figure explicitly said something.
Yeah. Well, I kind of realized I was running out of time, so
Yeah.
because my long setup.
Emmy, would you like to go next?
Oh, sure. My stepson. He and I have some things in common. We both like to cook. However, he's a bit more organized about it than I am. So he comes for a visit and he goes into my kitchen and he takes a look at the counter and all the stuff, junk that I have collected on the counter. And he goes, "Oh, this will never do. How can you make bread on that counter?" And he starts clearing it off and putting things away and who knows where the away is? I didn't. Or they wouldn't be sitting there if I knew where the away was. And then part of putting everything away, he opens up the pantry door and he goes, "Oh, no wonder there's everything on the counter. This is a mess. How do you know where to put anything?" And he totally reorganized my pantry. And then when he was done, he said, "Oh, look at that. See, you'll be able to make bread. You can make pickles." He's the pickle maker, not me. And I was so irritated inside, but I'm going, "Oh, gee, Dana, thank you. That's so nice of you to do that." Yeah. What was going on in my head was, whose kitchen is this anyway? He cleaned it for me. Back to you.
Thank you, Emmy. Okay, comments on what Emmy did that worked, that made this funny.
Parents and kids.
Say that again.
Parents and kids.
Parents and kids.
Yep.
Yeah. Universal. Also, order versus disorder. People having a sense of order versus disorder is universal. Some people are more comfortable with order or disorder. Anything else that Emmy did that made this work?
Yeah, she also had, her your expressions, your voice. You really brought energy and humor to your speech because of that.
Emmy is very emotive.
Yeah.
Yeah. you don't hide much there. Mary?
She did the and then kind of kept building the outrage in the story.
Any other comments on what Emmy did well? One of the things I liked was you said he put things away wherever away is, and then I think you used it again. He fixed the cupboard and put things away, but I don't know where away is. And I would encourage you to develop that, because I actually want to change the ending. Because if away is a magical place into which stuff that you don't want there disappears, I think at the end you should say, "I wanted him to go away." Any other suggestions for Emmy and how she could make this funnier?
One thing, Emmy, was that your son?
My stepson. Yeah.
Stepson. So I would have, you mentioned that right at the beginning, and then toward the end I would have said it again. "I can't believe my stepson was doing this." You said your stepson's over, but I think it would have maybe even.
Yeah. Okay.
So at the very end, Emmy, you say he takes after his father.
Oh, but he doesn't. But yeah, it would
yeah.
work well.
He
Hey,
takes
who cares
after-
about the truth?
You could just say he takes after that side of the family.
Or he could say he definitely doesn't take after that side of the family. Depending how you want to, do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you want your cat to go away.
I do, and she's just persistent.
Who would like to go next? Would one of our guests like to go next?
I could go next.
Okay, Christine.
Last Thursday night, it was a dark, moonless night when I arrived home. But even before I entered my little cul-de-sac, a dead-end street, I knew that there was something up because there was a flow of traffic coming out, and coming from the opposite direction was a flow of traffic coming in. I managed to get in and find the only park there was in the street. But as I went to get out of the car, I couldn't get out because there was other cars coming in. Realizing that it was a dead-end street, they're all turning around to come back out. And it was ridiculous. I was held in the car for at least half an hour because every time I went to open the door to get out, more headlights would just flash down the street. It was like a diarrhea of traffic. It would come in spurts. And then when you think that you can get out or get off, you'd open the door and then again, another spurt would come. I was embarrassed. I rang my sister and she said, "Oh, that's ludicrous. Just get out of the car." I said, "I don't want to be taken away with the car door on a dark night." And that's what it was like, a diarrhea of traffic.
Oh my gosh.
Ludicrous.
You did. You used the word. I had opportunities and I failed to use it in my talk. So well done.
Thanks.
What did Christine do that made this work?
The metaphor.
The metaphor. Yes, thank you. I didn't want to be the one to say that. The metaphor. Yes. Comparing traffic to diarrhea.
Well, you also,
What's that?
oh, well, Christine, you come off as having a very dry sense of humor. Then all of a sudden, you first 45 seconds or something, you're like saying this, and all of a sudden the word diarrhea comes out. And it's a whole different story. Very
The
funny.
thing is, Bob, I always suffer, I think, with the fact that I feel that I'm too serious. And so trying to find humor is not always something easy to do.
Yeah.
We did a great job.
When she used the word diarrhea, that was the explosive part of the whole story.
Very
Oh. And you changed your language about the traffic coming in spurts.
Right.
And if you wanted to extend the metaphor, you could. I mean, as somebody who went through norovirus last year, where you get off the toilet and you're going back out into the house and nope, gotta go back. You could have talked about that need to get back.
Well, that's what it was like. I couldn't get out every time I went to.
Yep.
Yeah, that's ludicrous, Kyle.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
I love the way the Lee said, it was blurted it out because it was like blurts and spurts. So
Cute.
So any suggestions for what Christine could do to make this even better?
Maybe some of the lead up to it, that first part where you talk about the cars coming in and out. I was having a hard time visualizing exactly what was going on there.
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't have a great suggestion off the top of my head, but it may, clean that here.
I was thinking about foreshadow. and the fact that you could foreshadow the disgusting nature where you're going if you described the road and the turn people had to do as, a loop in the
Intestine.
small intestine, something like that. It was like a loop in the small intestine where cars had to go up and go around and something like
And
that.
there were blockages because it's only a small.
Yeah, you can have some fun with that.
Oh, thank you.
Any other suggestions for Christine?
Well, thank you for the suggestion.
I think it was really fun. I normally don't much appreciate toilet humor, but that was so unexpected and so apropos.
I like the suggestion of your sister. Just open the door. When I opened the door, I just diverted the traffic. I was like diverticulitis. And I got out of that car.
Oh, you're funny. Oh, dear. In some ways, it might have been that, one would have thought that my phone call to her was like an irritable bowel event. So.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Who would like to go next? We have time for a couple more. You want to go, Phil? Okay. You're muted, Phil.
Muted.
There. How's that? Am I good?
Yep.
Okay. When I was growing up, my parents had a small farm. After spending years in the military, they bought the small farm in northern Minnesota. We had the menagerie of animals: cats, dogs, hamsters, cows, horses, everything. Each of the kids had a favorite animal. Of course, my sister would choose a cat and I would choose a dog. Now, in these days, we had a thing called Saturday Night at the Movies. These were the days when we had one TV in the house. These were the days where you had 3 channels to choose from. As a result, if Mom didn't choose what we were watching, Dad did. And everybody watched the same show. There I was, watching Saturday Night at the Movies, and my sister's cat came over to me, insisting that I pet him. Fine. It's ludicrous that I would pet my sister's favorite cat. I did, though, being the good brother that I am. The cat obviously enjoyed me scratching his back. Then I would scratch his ears. And he turned to look at the movie on the television screen and peed in my face. Ah! Ladies and gentlemen, the cat became an astronaut that day. Back to you, Toastmaster.
Oh, God.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to remove the spotlight. What did Phil do that made this work? What did Phil do that made this work? Sorry,
He
Lee.
played
Go
with
ahead.
the cat. That's what made it work. He played with the cat. And usually when someone gets peed off, someone goes into orbit. So
Yeah.
I should have ended with, that's when I learned it's better to be peed on than peed off.
there you go.
No, it's not. It's the other way around.
Okay. So that's a good ending. I like that. I really like the wordplay ending. What else worked that Phil did?
So there was the juxtaposition between him and his sister, dog and cat. I think maybe that
Mhm.
should have played up a little bit more. And then maybe make some comment about the dog at the end that My dog would have never done that. That's why he's never been in orbit.
I liked the surprise of it. You know, I certainly wasn't expecting that the cat was going to pee in his face.
Right.
I mean, that was.
Since then, Phil has always had a beard.
One of the things I liked, you spent time up front painting a picture of the farm. And you could develop that even further. I have seen, I had a friend in Toastmasters Extraordinaires over in D2 who grew up in southern Tennessee and Kentucky and South Carolina. And he would tell the most wonderful stories about growing up as a boy in, you know, the hot, humid summers, you know, playing on a tire swing. And 3/4 of his story was just painting word pictures. And he would bury the setup for whatever the trouble was going to be in amongst the word picture. And, you know, so when the trouble developed, it came as a surprise. So you could describe that, you know, and you know, you're not interested in the, and I love the TV, you know, I'm sure it was black and white, which you didn't mention, but I'm sure it was black and white. I remember the 3 channels, the rabbit ear antennas on top, unless they were unless you were rich and you had it on the roof, and you know, that was what the, you know, the wealthy people did in the neighborhood, and if you wanted to change the channel, you had to walk 10 feet through shag carpet to do it.
Well, Tina, I kind of felt that the farm was sort of extraneous because your favorite animals weren't farm animals. I was expecting to say one was a pig and one was a cow, or a, you know, something else, or the chicken, her favorite chicken. He should get a laid an egg in his lap. But so I think I would prefer more setup with the TV and the shag carpet or whatever, rather than the farm. But I don't think it necessarily contributed a whole lot, but in your memories, I'm sure it did.
Yeah, I was kind of, I mean, you could kind of like mine, you could kind of shorten out the lead up to it to get to the punchline earlier, I guess. Or you could expand it like you know, Kyle did, kind of some of that, so you could take it a couple different ways, I think.
Yeah, I actually want to comment on that, because we're moving into what could you do to make it better. If your opening was compressed a little bit, so you get to the TV room faster, you could not only tell us, but show us the emotion of, oh, the cat's coming over to me. Oh, that's, you know, what's going on here? Oh, well, yeah, this isn't so bad. It's kind of nice. Oh, you know, and make sure you play up the cat. Oh, lying on the back, doing the paws, purring, and, you know, doing all the, you know, but show us your emotion about doing it. Oh, this is very soothing. Oh, it's soothing. Oh, he peed in my face. You know. Yeah, the suddenness of moving from you know, soothing and enjoyment to wah. And then I love the moral of the story. It's better to be peed off than peed on.
So I'm not a cat person, and and I know that there are a number of people here because we've seen them visible. But I have to say, when you said the cat peed on you, like, that just grossed me out. And I didn't want to hear anymore. Like, I didn't think it was funny.
Okay.
I was like, so for me to be funny, I think I would, if a longer speech, play up more the competition between you and your sister, kind of thing. And then it's, to me, that's more universal.
But the diarrhea was okay. Is that correct, Miranda?
It was not about an animal. It was not about an animal.
Let's check it.
Okay.
Right.
Here at Lab Storymasters, we learn a lot about each other's boundaries.
I mean, I'm just saying.
I love it.
The other thing you could add, there's room there if you wanted to develop it for what is the dog doing? Is the dog reacting to your petting the cat? Is your sister reacting to the cat coming to you and you petting the cat? Is your sister doing anything with the dog? You know, there's room to play here if you want to.
Yeah, the sister's sitting over there telling the cat to pee on him. Come on, you can do it. Piss on him. Piss on him.
Of course, if that's the case, then there's payback at some point.
Yeah. And if you gave that speech following MEs, you could say, I made the cat go away.
Whatever that is.
Okay, I think we have, nope, we are out of time. We are out of time. We have taken up our time. And I hope you've enjoyed this workshop. I hope you got something out of it. Take page 2 home, play with it, think about it. My single biggest suggestion is start a story journal, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. I'm going to give control back to our Toastmaster, Cynthia.
Thank you, Kyle. That was very enjoyable. I enjoyed that a lot. Got me thinking about a 1 to 2 minute story, but then you called time. Oh, well, maybe another time. Next up, we go to our general evaluation portion of the meeting, correct?
Yes.
And that is Lee.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow story masters and friends. It would be ludicrous of me if we didn't call on our timer at this point, because timing is everything in humor.
Yes, timing. It's time for our times, and I am very diligently here keeping track of everything. I'm not sure what I'm showing there because it's the backside of my. Okay, we had Phil. He had 8 to 12 minute time frame, and he just fit underneath it at 11:54. So great time there. Kyle was up to 25 minutes, and you were at 24:34. And then you, at the end of that, you gave us some more instructions, but I quit when I felt your speaking was done. And then we have 4 people that gave examples. I was 2 minutes and 2 seconds, so I was a little long, which is not totally ludicrous. Emmy was 1:35, right in the middle there. Christine 1:23, so she did not have diarrhea of the mouth. And Phil 1:45, so you teed us up for that. And that's my report, Mr.
All right, thank you, Bob. And we would be remiss if we didn't hear from the ludicrous ME. So let's hear what you found today.
I beg your pardon.
You can, and I will appreciate that.
All right. Wow, we had some wonderful things going on here tonight, not to mention a very fun meeting. I focused on what phrases I really enjoyed that people shared with us. For instance, the insidious question that Kyle's wife was asking him. And then one of the suggestions he had for us to find funny stories is just tell a story that you tell to your closest friends. I really enjoyed that. And then when he said, and I didn't get lynched. Okay, then we had Lee. I loved how you popped in there and said some fun things, like explosive, referring, of course, to Christine's speech, and diverting traffic. Okay, so you got me laughing there. And Christine with her blurts and squirts. Very nicely done. Then there were just a couple of things, like Kyle, a couple of times you said in a nutshell, which I thought was fine for once, but to keep coming back to it, not so great. You could have said something like, well, I don't know, but anyway. Then Phil's story, he was talking about polishing techniques, and really you need a polishing rag to polish the techniques. I also enjoyed how the elephant in the room became a whiffum? Isn't that what you call that? A whiffum? Yeah. So that's the why. Now I can't remember what the whiffum stood for.
What's
I
in it
liked
for
it,
me?
but
For me.
what's in it for me? That was it. Nicely done. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. Okay. So all in all, great meeting. We had ludicrous used by several people, Christine and Lee and Phil and Kyle and Bob. Did I leave anybody out? I think that was about it. Anyway, great job, everybody. Fun evening.
Thank you, Emmy. Excellent, excellent word and excellent review of the grammar and word uses. I will do a brief evaluation of both Phil and Kyle. Both of them were very good stories for today's opening session of our journey that we're going to take on how to be more humorous as we go forward. Just the facts, ma'am. Dated yourself, Phil, but we all knew that one. Everybody, I can tell just by the hair color of most people in this room that we knew what that meant. But the young kids today were getting FAX, right? Okay, because they're tech savvy. Phil touched on the why, which I was real glad to hear that, because the why is the most important question. And then he went into the whiffum, an old phrase that we used a couple of decades ago, but still powerful. What's in it for me? They used to say it all the time when we were trying to form a new Toastmaster club. We formed this new club, Toastmaster club. We got to let the audience know what's in it for me, meaning them. Why tell this story? You told us about the why audience would want to hear this story, because you're going to entertain the audience, you're going to inform the audience, you're going to give them a personal story. Where do I get stories to tell? Look inward at our own life experiences. Refer to some stories delivered in our club. I thought that was a really cool technique, because it brought people in kind of without them knowing, but they realized it was their stories. I thought that was very clever, Phil. How do we keep track of all these stories in our life, Phil? Well, you told us. You said, write it down in a journal or in your diary. Every presentation is a storytelling opportunity. Let me say that again. Every presentation is a storytelling opportunity. Excellent phrase, Phil. Convert data into a story. Reflect on our whys to tell a story. And stories are all around us. Write them down. So that was your summary. I have one comment for suggestion, and that was at the very opening, Phil. You just got introduced by Cynthia, and you almost kind of reiterated some of the stuff she said about how you got in the. I wanted you to just start with, I was in a Toastmaster meeting when I first started, and I got this great evaluation. They said this, 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 and this. And at the very end, the evaluator said, but it wasn't interesting. And there's a great lead in to why we want to be humorous. So other than that, I thought you did a great job, Phil. You spoke at a pace that we could all digest what you were saying. And it was just very easy to understand what you're saying. You had very powerful points to make as well. So good job, Phil. I will open it up to anybody else. Anybody else want to make a comment to Phil about what they liked or a potential suggestion for improvement?
I want to point out that Phil was talking about storytelling, and he told a story about his early experiences learning about storytelling from listening to his dad.
Yes. Okay, anybody else have anything they want to say? I know Phil was almost perfect I can imagine why there's nothing to say. What would we give him to improve? And what did he not do well? Who knows? We'll just put that away. Let's get on to Kyle. Now, Kyle had 2 sessions tonight, but let's start with the very beginning. And what I liked about Kyle is he did what I just suggested for you, Phil. He just started with a story. Are you going to wear that shirt? And then, okay, right into it. Explained what that meant. Explained it with wife speak. And then Kyle turned it back on her. What would you like for dinner? What would you like for your birthday? And then it was, I don't care was his wife's answer, but what she really meant was, show me how much you love me by figuring out what I just said to you. And I think all wives love doing that. It's the torture of love. And if love doesn't hurt, you are not in love. So that was awesome. And Kyle had a lot of stories. And what's cool about Kyle's presentation tonight, he kept bringing in his family, his wife. And it wasn't ever defamatory to his wife. It was just, this is what happens. I think we all identify it. Anybody who's been married, we've all had parents. We've all seen that relationship between husband and wife. And it was just neat the way he did that and kind of had that thread going all the way through his story. He also told us that you can put humor in almost every type of speech. And I was thinking, well, why won't we put humor in a eulogy? I mean, people are here at that somber moment. They want to laugh at the great memories of the person who passed. So I think a eulogy is almost the best place to put humor. We always do it at a wedding. We always do that. But there's nothing wrong with doing it at a eulogy, because we don't want to just be crying. We want to remember the good times, right? So he talked about that. He also talked about careful when you're talking about tragedy or horror, when you're going to do humor. Write down instances when laughter happens. Kind of like what Phil was saying, when it happens, write it down, because sometimes we forget them. Always have a journal. And then he talked about fear and frustration are 2 very good sources for humor, and we saw that later in his workshop. What I really liked about what Kyle was doing, it took me a while. I go, oh, I see what Kyle's doing here. He used the stage really well. I mean, a lot of us forgot how to use stage when we've been on Zoom, right? Kyle went back into the square and did his speech, and then he would come up. He wouldn't talk. He would just come up, put his face in the camera, and he would start telling us something, and that's called an aside. And when he does the aside, it's like, oh, the speaker is giving a special secret that he has to the audience. So we all lean in. But what an aside does, when a speaker does that, it builds a strong rapport with his audience. So I love that movement that he did all throughout that first part of the presentation, where he was delivering his information. He was doing the speech, and then he was coming close to us and telling us what all that meant. So that was a really good use of stage, even on this small little Zoom frame. I thought that was great. I'm going to probably steal that from Kyle someday. Then he went into 2 tools and an attitude. That almost sounds like the name of a sitcom, 2 tools and an attitude. He talked about juxtaposition, comparing 2 ideas against each other, and the metaphor. And then he talked about how the secret decoder ring, which he talked about a lot tonight, was a metaphor. Having to decode what your enemy is saying. He talked about what is a decoder, because some people may not remember those cereal boxes with the little toy. He said having to decode what your enemy is saying, or decode what your spouse is saying. And I was thinking he was going to say, which for some is the same thing. But he didn't. He was cool. I'm not. Vocal variety and animation. I think those are the 2 phrases I would say about Kyle's presentation. He had a lot of vocal variety and a lot of animation, and that just kept sucking us in as he talked about humor, and he also had a lot of humor. And then I really liked when he was doing he called it the family at home. And there's that one part in that whole scenario where the little Joey is yelling at mom about the cookies, and his voice went into this kind of, we felt like Joey was downstairs, mom was upstairs, and you got that kind of screaming child at mom, and he did his voice perfect there. It like just created the scene. Beautiful, beautiful, Kyle. And then he talked about Form 105, and I think a bunch of people almost fell out of their chairs. I don't know if that's a form people know but it was just kind of cool. This needs to be filled out, and if you do, it's going to cause a delay in the deliverable. That's pretty cool. Everybody that works in corporate America is going to get that. So that was really cool. And the whole family at home was one big giant metaphor. And I think that's all you have to do when you have to deliver a dry presentation. I've had to go deliver a dry presentation where I put just a picture of a duck on a slide. I didn't have 15 PowerPoint slides with the 4-point font with 1,000 words on each slide, and they also have pie charts and bar charts and graphs all in one slide. It was just a duck. And every time I made a point, I talked about the bill, and then I talked about the feet. For example, the feet for the duck, they're the landing gear for when he's flying. They're also for him to walk. They're also for him to use to locomote when he's in water. So I talked about how the duck's feet were very versatile, and I related that to the project. So all they had to remember at the end of my project was this duck. So all we had to remember from Phil is the family at home story, and that's the full metaphor, and we remember everything. It was beautiful. So some final points he had was, he talked about attitude, share your embarrassing moments, be willing to be a fool. That is the most important concept we can say to anybody who wants to speak in front of the audience, whether you're doing humor or not. Don't be afraid to be a fool. Don't do humor that may offend, very important. Do universal topics, and he talked of a few. Couples, parents and kids, people and animals. And the last lesson that Kyle gave us, does anybody remember what that was? It's how you get to Carnegie Hall. Practice, practice, practice. Okay, thank you, Kyle. And that's my report on the speakers. And overall, I think we had a great meeting. We're on time. I'm getting the red light from Bob, but since I'm still so dynamic, he's not getting the hook, but I'm going to give it right back to Cynthia, our Toastmaster. Well done, everyone. And I also want to say, I like that all the people jumped in on the workshop. We had really good participation because of the way Kyle set it up. It just facilitated us to get into the workshop. Back to you, Cynthia.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Kyle for our homework.
Okay. So I am now playing my role as VPE of the club, and we have a homework assignment for everybody. I would like everybody, if you don't already have one, to start a story journal. If you have one, great. I'm going to give you some specific exercises to start putting stories in your story journal. And a story journal could be, I use an Excel spreadsheet. Some people use a book. Some people use a Word file. Some people like to keep loose leaf papers or 3x5 cards. Do it any way you want, whatever works for you. If you're ME, just scatter the 3M sticky notes all over the kitchen. Whatever works for you. I like to put it in a spreadsheet so that I can sort them. I like put the year it happened and maybe the point I'm trying to make or the point I think that comes out of it, and then some details of the story. But anyway.
Okay, Kyle.
Yes.
I'd use the story journal on the international website. It's actually quite good.
Yes. Do you remember which that's connecting with
That
story?
was the humor. Oh no, I think it was the humor one.
Okay. So
well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
if you I think if you look at connecting with storytelling or the speaking with humor, there is a story journal that you PDF you can download, but you don't need that, but you can certainly use it. I want you to start a story journal. I would like you to make a list of the rooms in the house you grew up in. Make a list of all the rooms in the house you grew up in, and make a list of 8 or 10 people that you knew growing up. And then once you have those two lists, I want you to start thinking about, what stories do I have for this room? What stories do I have for this person? I'm thinking right now, there was the den where we used to sit and watch TV, not unlike what Phil was describing. And I have a story about how I discovered the use of tools when I was 4 years old, taking my little plastic tool set that my parents had given me I had a chisel and a little plastic chisel and a little plastic hammer, and I proceeded to chisel all the finish off of the love seat that was in there, and my mother was furious. That's my story for sitting in that. That's my story about doing something that was not appreciated in that room. Go through. You've got a list of rooms. In every room, make a list. Make a list of at least one story that happened in that room. If you got 10 stories, just make a list of them, and then go through your list of 10 people you knew growing up. Hey, Johnny. Johnny was my high school friend. What's my story about Johnny? Maybe it's meeting Johnny. Maybe it's how we went from being enemies to friends. Maybe whatever. And just start recording them. And if you look at the nature of the story, you may come up with a theme, a message for the story. Maybe you were nice to Johnny, and now Johnny stopped being your enemy and became your friend. Oh, okay. There's a message there. So that's the big exercise. The small exercise is by the end of this weekend, I will have the Free Toast Toast website. I will have our agenda for October set up on the Free Toast Toast website, and there will be 3 or 4 speaker slots. These are 5 to 7 minute slots for somebody who wants to practice. Now, you have to be a member, so if you want a speaking slot, you gotta join the club. And we say 5 to 7 minutes because it's a time frame that Toastmasters are used to. We're not necessarily targeting contest speeches, although you could. But it's 5 to 7 minute slot. We'll have 3 or 4 of them, and we will have 3 evaluators for all of them. And by the end of the weekend, this will be set up on Free Toast Toast. So on Monday, I want people to start signing up. If you want one of those speaking slots, you can call me or send me an email and say, I want a speaking slot, and I'll either stick your name in it or hold it for you. And if you're joining the club, if you're a guest just joining the club and you want one of the speaker slots, send me an email. I'll put it in the chat. That's your homework. I am going to hand control. I think I hand control to Cynthia. Do I not?
Yes.
I think I do.
Yes. Now it's time for the closeout of the meeting, and we're going to go around and talk to the guests. Starting with Ray Suk.
Thank you for having me in a very precious meeting, and especially I'd like to say thanks to Kyle and Emmy from Scream Toastmasters. And how could I say? I have interest in joining this club. Thank you.
Yes. So where are you from?
I'm from South Korea in Seoul.
Okay, so is that where you're calling from?
Pardon me?
Is that where you're at right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
what club do you belong to?
I belong to Screen Toastmaster Club and one club in Korea named Gangnam Morning Toastmasters. I always say, as a very, very self-justifying excuse, is English is not my native language, so a little difficulties to express myself and hear from others, but I love it.
Oh, you do well. Thank you. Christine, can you tell me where you're from and what club you belong to?
I'm in Sydney, Australia, and I have never been to any Toastmasters group anywhere. I just found this online, and it looked interesting, and I thought I'll pop in and see what it's about. And it's been a very, very smoothly run meeting with interesting input, invitation for engagement and involvement, and I've enjoyed it and would be interested to know more about the club. Is it an online club? Do you have to be logged to a Toastmasters club to come? I'm not sure what the story is.
Why don't we spend some time offline after the meeting closes, answering people's questions?
Okay. Cheryl Marks, can you tell us what club you're from and what you learned from the meeting and a little bit about you?
Okay, so my home club is Commerce Communicators, which Cynthia and I both belong to that club. I also belong to two other clubs. I belong to Sound Advice, the club that Mary Morrison mentioned, and Cynthia's in there also. And then I also belong to Capital Club Toastmasters, which is a club that meets in the evening in Olympia, Washington area. And I came tonight, main reason was because Cynthia invited me. Of course, I saw Kyle's announcement too about the meeting. So because both Kyle and Cynthia, know me. And I've always been interested in coming in and watching the meeting anyway and checking it out. I really would like to work on my humor. But right now, I'm not quite sure. I'm interested, but not quite sure what's going to happen because a few of you know that I'm retiring in a month and a half. And so I'm going to be limited on my income. And I already have 3 clubs I'm belonging to right now. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for those 3 clubs after I retire. And to add another one on top of it would be even more to have to worry about. So I have no idea what my plans are other than I'm trying to come up with some ways to make some money so that maybe I can continue to do Toastmasters, which is something that's really a big part of my life, and I love it. And this meeting was just wonderful, and I know it could help me out a lot. So I'm not totally saying no, but we'll see what happens in the future. So thank you for letting me come, and I will come in to the meetings in the future, especially after October, because I don't have to work. So I have the time I can go to Toastmasters meetings. So thank you for having me tonight.
Helen, can you tell us what club you're with and where you're
Yeah,
from?
I'm joining from Shanghai, China. I am a member and previous club president of Shanghai EGG Toastmaster Club. And because I'm living in China and because of the firewall of this networking issue, so I cannot get access to your document on this Google website. I'm sorry for that. And thanks for Mary's invitation. Actually, I joined Mary's club, which is about improvised performance 2 years ago, and which impressed me a lot. Yeah, that's why I reached out to Mary to see if this club is still going on, and she sent me the invitation of your club meeting. I really enjoyed this meeting, especially the part that which I believe is Phil say about where can I find humor. It's more about inward. It's more about how we can discover ourselves and make a fool of that. And by making fool of that, we actually, I would say, discover the other part of ourselves. Yeah, I really enjoy that. Thank you for this great meeting.
Okay. Jess, would you like to say where you're from and what club you belong to?
Hi there. My name's Jess. I don't belong to any club, but I really enjoyed tonight. Thank you all. I've giggled a lot in the background, but I'm already in my PJs and it's late here in Philadelphia. I'm originally from Australia, but I decided to join this evening because I've been hosting an online laughter club for the past 3 years. Laughter is the only word I say with an American accent, because otherwise Americans have no idea what I'm talking about when I say laughter. They're like, what is a laughter club? I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I really enjoyed tonight, and I hope to come back again another time because I'd love to share. But yeah, thank you so much for letting me join in. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think I got all the guests. And anybody else like to say something about the meeting tonight, what you got out of it, and besides the word ludicrous?
I got about
Emmy.
5 pages of notes. I'm happy. I got about 5 pages of notes. Yeah. I just wanted to say to those of to our 2 guests who are not members that we encourage people to come whether they're members or not. So even if you're not going to join, you're still welcome to come and participate. We would certainly love to have you. We would really love you to join too, but you know.
All right. Kyle, is there anything else for the good of the order?
Just to put my spin on what Emmy was saying, we love having guests come. I think of it as guests are the people standing on the side of the street watching the parade go by, and that's a fun thing to do. Or you can be the people in the parade, but that means joining the club, and no pressure. Do what you do. Play the role you wish to play. Let's pass it over to our president, Emmy Morrison. Sorry,
Mary.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Kyle and Phil, for the extra effort you took tonight to prepare for the evening. And thank you, Cynthia, for taking on the role of Toastmaster, and everyone for taking on roles in the club. So I have a brief story to share. When Kyle, who was one of the main people putting this club together a couple of years ago, talked a lot about it, I really hesitated joining because I have been told I am too analytical to have a sense of humor, and I can't get the basics of a story. So I knew those were 2 things I really needed to work on, and I'm serious about it. Ugh. And every time I put myself out by telling a story or giving a speech in this club, it terrifies me, and I know I'm going to be so much better as a result. And I'm so grateful that I have joined this club to learn those skills. Next month, Kyle is on the website. You have already done that job, and we're focusing on the storytelling basics of how to create a setting, how to craft conflict, and how to develop your characters. And we'll have somebody focusing on that, 3 or 4 speakers, 3 evaluators for each speaker. I can't think of a better way to improve my storytelling or humor. Please join us if you think you'd benefit from that.